You probably expect me to speak about the 6 million Americans that eat in a Panera every week. But I'm here to talk about the people that don't eat in a Panera. Here's the question for you. Let's start. Right? What's the reality of life? Let me throw something up. Right? In which country is 1 in 4 children struggling with hunger? In which country? Is it South Africa? Is it? How's another one? How about China? We hear all about poverty in China. Is it China? How about Mexico? Mexico, right? Is it happening in Mexico? Let me throw one other country up there. Is it happening in the United States? 1 in 4 struggling with hunger? Look, in this country, right? In which country is 1 in 4 children struggling with hunger? Let me answer it for you. You know the answer. The good old US of A. 1 in 4 struggling. 1 in 6 Americans live in food insecure households. Have you heard that term, food insecure? Let me tell you about the term food insecure. What is food insecure? It's the way the USDA calls people that are starving. It's what the USDA uses as a word to sanitize what is the reality of life for way too many people in our country. Let me ask you another question. Have you ever worked in a food pantry? Have you ever personally worked in a food bank? Let me tell you a little bit about me. I have a 6-year-old and I have an 11-year-old. And we've had lots of good fortune in our lives. And one of the most important things for me is to give them an experience of what it's like for others, an experience of what it's like to see and experience those that don't have the benefits that they have. So we try regularly to work in it. This happens to be a picture that represents my experiences. Several years ago, I went to work in one of the organizations that delivers food to those folks that are shut in. And we spent 45 minutes to get there. We went and we had to pick our own food. That took about an hour. We then got back in our car and delivered 2 satchels to an elderly couple. 3 hours, 3 children, 9 hours. We delivered 2 satchels. I figured our hourly rate, it was about 30 cents an hour, the value of our time. I sat there as a business guy who runs a business, and I said to myself, you know, this is so inefficient. It may make me feel good, but does it actually add any value? I would have been much smarter to just written a check. And I thought to myself, you know what? If a guy like me who runs these things every day, if I ever got a hold of it, I would have changed the entire system. And those entrepreneurial juices in me began to think, there's got to be better ways to do this. And then one night, 3 years ago, I was watching TV. And you know those moments, Elizabeth Gilbert spoke about it, when you get it, when something just hits you? I'm sitting there watching TV, Brian Williams, NBC News, and they do that piece, Making a Difference, people who make a difference. And they began to talk about a cafe that had been created in Denver, Colorado, called the Same Cafe. And this cafe had a crazy idea. The crazy idea is they'd have no prices. They'd feed anybody from the community who wanted to come in. They'd ask them to pay what they could afford without mandatory prices. And what was amazing about this story is they'd spend years trying to build this cafe, trying to get it up and going, to get it moving. They got it up and going, and the momentous event was they were operating, they were serving folks. And they were serving 40 people a day. And as I watched this show late at night, I turned to my wife, and I said, Nancy, this is crazy. We do this. We open 2 cafes a week somewhere in this country. We have 60,000 people that know how to run restaurants. We do this. And what else do? We make our living by being part of communities, by being part of people. This is about community. We do this. And let me tell you something else. We also are searching for new ways to make a difference. We at Panera, we give $150 million in donations a year. And yet we don't really do something. What we do is let somebody pick up the food and it disappears. We don't connect with it. We don't use our skills. We don't make a difference in ways in which we could, in the opportunities that are in front of us, in ways that Andre spoke to you earlier. So what do? What did we do? We decided to do what all entrepreneurs do. We decided to study what others were doing and try to come up with new solutions to the problems that we saw. So what did that mean for us? We went around the country and we started looking. We started visiting. We started seeing. There's a couple of these cafes that had been built, generally very small. First one I went to see was in Highland Park, New Jersey. This happens to be a picture of it. You can see just a couple of people, not a lot of people. I started to do the research. They serve a couple of hundred people a week. This is in the back of a church in Highland Park, New Jersey. Right? Let Let me show you our answer to it. As we started to think about it, we realized if this was going to actually succeed and we were going to actually create one of these cafes and we were going to do it, we had to take a huge risk. And that risk was to put our corporate reputation on the line. If we were going to do this, we couldn't do it as a cafe without our name on it. If we were going to attract the thousands of people we wanted to attract and to bring some credibility to it, it meant taking the full Panera experience and bringing that Panera experience to the table. What else did we see? We went to food shelters. Have you ever been to a food shelter? Have you ever waited in line outside a food shelter? It's a horrible experience. Right? You wait, and they finally let you in, and you go in, and you look around, and I'm in this line myself, and everybody around me is poor, and everybody around me is struggling, and everybody around me is at the effect of life, and you feel so sucked down by it. The energy is so negative. The feelings are so contrary to what brings out the best in you. And then you eat the food. And what does the food taste like? It tastes like the stuff we got in second grade. Right? In second grade, we could tolerate it. But is it the food we want to eat? And it began to make us think. And we started to think some more. We said, if we're really going to put our name on it, what do we do with it? And when we first started thinking about the idea, we said, you know what we'll do? We'll take some of our soup. We'll do that in a little cafe. We won't charge any prices. And you know what else we'll do? We'll have some coffee. And maybe we'll bring some fresh yesterday baked goods in. That was our original idea. But we went through the experience of being in a food kitchen, in a soup kitchen. And you know what we decided to do? We decided to do it the right way. And what did that mean for us? It meant the full-bore Panera menu, the full-bore experience. This was a big risk for us. It meant soups. It meant salads. It meant sandwiches. It meant the things that were going to cost money. What else? What else did we learn in this process? We started to think about how do you collect the money, right? Because in many ways, this whole experiment is ultimately a test of humanity. Would people pay for it? Would people come in and value it? Would people consider it something they would sustain? And here's the question. How do you collect money when you're saying to some people, if you don't have it, you don't have to pay it? To others, we're saying, give more. How do you collect that money? We certainly can't have a 1099 test at the door. And we certainly don't want to judge you by how you look and the clothes you have on. How do we know who should leave what? How do we make sure we can take care of the people that really have need while at the same time taking the people that don't have need and trying to say to them, listen, you got a responsibility and an obligation. How do you do that? Well, the first thing we did is we decided to really live what we said and go in and do it without any standard prices. Right? Really hard for a guy who does $3 billion a year with standard prices. Very hard. But we did it. We said this was our slogan, take what you need, leave your fair share. Let me share with you something else we did. And this was probably the hardest thing. Because most of the cafes we had visited who tried this model, these small ones, they'd eventually moved to cash registers. The reason they went to cash registers is they had to collect enough money to keep themselves in business, to sustain. We started to say, you know what? What we're trying to do is treat people with dignity. If we're going to treat people with dignity, we've got to do it in such a way that those people feel the dignity in the process. And if we sit there and look at you and say, you can leave whatever you want, but here's the cash register, how much are you leaving me? We're destroying that dignity. And we said we're going to take a chance. We're going to give you just a donation box. And we're going to leave it up to you to leave what you want. In that way, we can protect people. But for us, this was a test of humanity. Would they show up and would they leave the money? Let me share with you something else we thought about and learned. This happens to be a picture of me, and you have my little boy down there in the bottom right. When we celebrated our 15th anniversary as a public company, we were at NASDAQ, and we rung the metaphorical bell of NASDAQ, and I got to sign my name. I've got $3 billion of public shareholders. I don't think they would feel so good if I gave away stores. I don't think they would be so happy if we just continued to pour money in it. And I was able to convince our company that what we would do is take this store, we would put it into a 501c3, a nonprofit, we'd give the store away, but ultimately it had to be a cafe of shared responsibility. It had to be a cafe that could sustain itself over the medium and long term. So we committed to doing just that. And as we began to think about it, we had to find communities in which this could work. One of the questions we're often asked, Why don't we just go to the poorest neighborhoods? Because we can't sustain it if we go to a neighborhood in which there are only poor folk. On the other hand, we ended up in Clayton. And Clayton was a perfect neighborhood for us. And Clayton was perfect because you had the townhouses, you had the folks that had money, and yet you had folks that were homeless out on the streets. You had the folks coming out of the criminal justice system across the street. You had all kinds of people. It was perfect for what we wanted to test and try. Okay, what else? We dreamed. What was the dream behind it? Frankly, the dream was if we could get this thing to sustain and work, we could then use this as a model to begin to work with some of the young people that Andre talked about and the judge talked about. Take some of these young people that have been such at the effect of our society that they've been removed from society, they've been institutionalized. How do you bring them back? We have 3,000 employees in the St. Louis market. How do we find ways to bring some of these folks that have been such at the effect of our society and bring them back into the mainstream? And could we ultimately take these cafes and triple leverage our skills, not just feed those that could not feed themselves, but also use this as a training ground to basically train folks to enter the mainstream again? That was the dream. That was the dream we hoped. And the final dream we hoped is, in doing this, could we set an example for ourselves and maybe for others to say that corporations could do more than just give a check, that could actually step up and take responsibilities where they had core competence. That was the dream. So here's the question. What happened? The moment of truth. Like every entrepreneur, you got to finally open it. You got to take action. And on Sunday, May 16th, 2010, we opened the first Panera Cares here in Clayton. And this is actually the original logo. This is how it took form on that morning. And this is our little team cutting the ribbon. That's me in the middle, the guy without hair, as we cut the ribbon. And I did what every entrepreneur does. I spent the first 2 weeks working in that cafe. And my purpose in working was to try to understand what was going on and how would this work and would it take form and how would it take form. Let me share with you some of what we learned. First thing we learned is that nobody understood how to work the system. We put up huge signs. They still didn't read them. Right? We said, don't leave any money. You don't have to leave money. Take your fair share. They didn't understand it. And what we decided to do, the first decision we made within an hour of opening, was to create a position called a greeter, which is just a talking version of a sign. Right? Because I was sitting there trying, basically personally, to explain to every customer how this works, and I couldn't do it all those hours. And we needed a way. So we brought in a cadre of folks that could actually verbalize what this mission was and how it works and how you work the system. Second thing for us, second issue for us is the moment of truth, was our own team members. Fascinating experience. I remember getting up the day before we opened and talking about it. And I remember how many of our own team members looked at me and they said, you know what, Ron? I've been there where I didn't have enough food. I've been in this place. See, the folks that work in many of our cafes are the very folks that have been at the effect of it. And these are folks that have made the step to take care of themselves. And this is a cafe, Clayton, where we have veterans that have been there 5 years, 10 years. We have one gentleman who's been in that cafe for 19 years. Now making 13 or 14 an hour, living a decent life. But they were very afraid as they thought about it. If we do this, are we going to lose our jobs? What happens if this doesn't work? Right? And I'm not so sure. I think this is a really beautiful idea, but what happens? And we began to play with it. And I remember the morning we opened, an elderly woman who works in the cafe, about 70 years of age. We're cleaning tables together about 11 o'clock, and she looks at me and says, you know, Ron, I prayed that this cafe would work. And you know, Ron, my prayers have been answered. I mean, she was so involved in it and cared so much about it. And the problem we began to have with our own team members is they were so defensive of it. They wanted it to work because they were the people that would benefit from it personally at some level. They knew that need, and they were so afraid that somebody would mess with it, somebody would game with it, that our own team members basically were saying, you got to put money in that drawer, right? And we were trying to say, no, we're trying to help people. You can't judge people, right? And we began this process of having to train them. And what else did we find? We found fascinating things with the customers. The emotional ups and downs were huge. I can remember that first day, I'm on behind the counter, and we got some kid who comes in, some high school kids, maybe 16 or 17, And they say, I'll take 3 sandwiches. I'll take 2 of those smoothies. Oh, yeah, and why don't you throw in a couple of those cookies? And by the way, I will help here. Here's my credit card. Dad's name's on it. Put $2 on it. I wanted to jump across the counter and kill the kids. I wanted to grab them by the neck and string up. And I said, wait a second, back off, Ron. This is not what it's about. You cannot do that, right? Slow down. I have people holding me back, right? And then we had those kind of experiences. And we had the guys that worked in the courthouse across the street to come and tested us. Can we get 200 of these sandwiches to go? You're going to give us away? And we had to talk to them and say, listen, this is not what you want to do. We're trying to do something right here. We're trying to do something that's a risk, but we're trying to do something right. And you could feel it. And you could feel the people that laughed at you and said, this is just an opportunity for me to game the system, to screw the man, lunch on Uncle Ron, big company, take advantage of it. And that just ripped you down, and it took you down. But then there was the other side of it. There was a whole other side of it. There was a side that really validated you, right? I can remember one morning, a guy comes in, says, listen, I was a tech writer. I lost my job 6 months ago. My family hasn't really had a real meal. I don't know where these kids, he had 3 children with him, I don't know where these kids are going to eat tonight. We used to love to come to Panera, the bread company. Can we eat here tonight? We said, that's why this place is here. Come on in. Right? We have regulars. We have all kinds of regulars. All kinds of people that came in. These are 2 of our regulars that are there every afternoon. It becomes part of their life. Let me share with you something else. Let me share with you the conclusion of the story. Is it working? Well, it's still the first chapter, but let me give you some updates. Right? First, 4,000 guests each week. Right? 4,000 people are served by this cafe. Let me share with you something else. Right? More volunteers than we can utilize. Right? We're sending people away. We can't use all the hours of people that want to be a part of this. And let me share with you something else. The real question for us, the test of humanity, is could it sustain itself? Would people just laugh at us? Would they think it's just an opportunity to rip the bread company off? Or would people step up and actually put something in that donation box? And the reality, 20% of customers leave more money than what the suggested retail price is. 20%, 1 out of 5. 60% leave basically the suggested retail, and 20% leave less or significantly less, generally significantly less. The net is we're generating about 80% of the retail price on average, roughly. And what that means, because this isn't a nonprofit, because it's transparent, we're actually, for the first time in the last 8 weeks, have generated more revenue than we've had cost. And the truth is, this is going to make it, it is going to sustain, it is going to go on. That may be a statement about St. Louis, it may be a statement about the people in St. Louis and their ability to care. We don't know. But I can only tell you, based on one cafe, as amazing as it is, with 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 customers going through this every 10 weeks, we are continuing to sustain and to make it. Let me share with you something else. What does that mean for us? And this is very important to us. We've now been able to begin to do the kind of direct programming we want. Our goal, as I said, is to take these young people that have been so institutionalized in the effective society and give them what they need is not just a job, but life skills. The ability to understand, how do you get a checking account? What does it mean to show up? And our hope is we're going through the process now of basically partnering with an organization like Covenant House to teach work skills. And we're bringing in kids from almost home, very tough. These are kids under 18, women with children, nowhere to go, they can't get in the shelters. We're going to try to help them move from these stabilization programs back into the mainstream because frankly, they've never been there. Give them a chance, give them an opportunity. Angel's Arms, which is essentially foster kids. This is the way we want to use the program, triple leverage. Let me share with you something else about it, the future. I think as you know, we started here in Kirkwood. From Kirkwood, we took Panera Bread to the country. Well, same thing. This is our first store, our first Panera Care in Clayton, Missouri. We are leaving here this afternoon. We're going to Dearborn, Michigan, where on Sunday we will open the second Panera Cares in a place that really needs it, Detroit, Michigan. And then from there, in January, we will open on the West Coast. So we're very excited about the prospects for where this takes us and, frankly, where we go. Let me mention something else. Here's the real question, the real challenge that we want to state with this, and the question I would ask you all. Will other companies step up to make a difference in new ways? Right? It's not enough to write a check. It's not enough to be sanitized away from the problem. As Andre said, we personally have to get involved. And what we're advocating here is that companies get involved. This happens to be the Fortune 10. I just picked them because they're the top of the list. But imagine a world in which Walmart did the food distribution for the food banks. Who knows better how to do that than a company like Walmart? Right? Think about a world in which the banks, JP Morgan or Bank of America, is worried and involved in people that are getting foreclosed and how they avoid foreclosure as in foreclosure, right? In running that system that they ran so rapidly. Think of a world in which the energy companies, so big, so much resources, are not only dealing with remediation after the oil spill, but dealing with helping us with this energy crisis that nobody can deny before there is a problem. Think about our largest companies, Ford, AT&T, HP, you name it, GE, the management talent that exists. They have pro bono efforts, but think about if they took on real responsibilities in these NGOs, if they took on real responsibilities in places like Haiti, where there's horrible, horrible problems, if our companies understood that their broader interests are the communities in which we operate. Let me leave you with this. There's another entrepreneur who I have great respect for, Bill Gates. He said something, I leave you with this. I hope you will judge yourself not on your professional accomplishments alone, but also on how well you've addressed the world's deepest injustices, on how well you treated people a world away who have nothing in common with you but your humanity. This is the test for each of us. Thank you.